This is like
This is the
the
best
blooper reel.
blooper reel. Have to use this footage.
Thanks very much for joining us. We're having a good time here in the studio. I'm joined by my really good friend, Claire. If you need to find her on LinkedIn, you're going to find her under Claire M. Davis of Traction Resume. But Claire, thank you so much for joining me today. I know it's a little short notice, but I am absolutely ecstatic we were able to pull this together.
Oh my goodness, me too, Tim. This is just our way. I don't know if anybody had the chance to catch Tim on my podcast last year, but you're an absolute gem. You have so much to share. And I think that now this will be our third impromptu podcast recording together. So I'm thrilled.
We're getting up there. And if it's not our third, it will be soon. It's funny that we come from such different angles professionally. You, of course, are helping people really get prepped to find their next best role and enhance their careers. And while I do the same thing, I come from a slightly different angle, and that is, leadership consulting and coaching. But we have a lot in common because the challenges that people are facing today are really similar, and there's some themes emerging. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say. And when I first started my business, and for anyone who we haven't met yet, I'm Claire Davis and I run Traction Resume. So essentially what I do is work with professionals in the medical sales industry and help them to come across as how brilliant they are in real life on paper. So what I didn't recognize would be part of the role when I very first started this company was that there would be so much coaching to help people to really foster what leadership and core morals look like for them on the inside. I really thought, Tim, that it would be, hey, everybody kind of knows their North Star. They've got their why down pat. They know what their core drivers really are. And I get to just put that on paper. But a large part is finding out those things as well. So I am eternally grateful for specialized coaches like you, because you help people figure out that internal stuff. And then we put it on paper to share that with the world.
I mean, the more I work, and as I'm entering now, I'm 2.5 decades into doing work with leaders. And, I'm just convinced every day that fluency is at the heart of everything. They have to know themselves before they can properly represent what they're ready to be out in the world. And if they can be that honest self when they take the job, through the interview process into taking the job and then with their teams, it's just so much easier and it's so much more authentic, and it's the easiest way to build trust because you don't have to put it on. You're just ready to do it all day, every day, because guess what? You don't have a choice. That's who you are in the wool. So I'm with you 100%. I mean, getting people to the point where they are ready to put it down on paper is such a big step. Even if they're going to stay where they're at, it's better to be dealing in reality, because otherwise the universe is going to give you a smack. And let's avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
Well, as we were getting ready to hit record here, we were talking about a couple of different things regarding personal brand. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on really what does that look like from an importance perspective, both in, medical sales, but also more generally, just for anybody that's in the middle of a career pivot. What does that look like on the outside?
So back in I'm going to date myself here. About 10, 15 years ago, I was entering into the workforce, into my chosen field, which was at the time marketing. And I had come up in the ranks through my career from a pharma recruiting business with my parents. So, the career conversation for me was always something that was very familiar. So the shock was that after my first job, which I had the degree for, I had been getting great results for my employer. The job comes along, it lasts about 6 months, and then I get laid off. And I was absolutely floored, Tim, because being in, learning how to interview from age 13 and being the only one coming up to the city volunteer job with a brag book, I really thought I had any kind of career snags, completely wiped out. Right. So huge shock. So I get back into the field. The next job I have is where I enter into medical sales and absolutely love it. Start doing well in the field, start getting great mentorship, falling in love with healthcare and helping people with their health. And a year and a half later, I get laid off again. And so the reason I'm sharing this story was, fast forward, I did not realize until the third layoff, so another one after this, that people wanted to do business with me, not because of my product or service, but they actually wanted to do business with me because of me.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't recognize it that way until that next job comes along, and I get another layoff. And I get this phone call, Tim. It was one weekend. I remember sitting in our little farmhouse out in Penryn, California at the time. And I get this call from the lab, and the lab director says, Claire, we are completely out of kits. We need to run this diagnostic test for this breast cancer patient. She needs this stuff right away. Can you help us? And I said, well, I mean, absolutely. But I don't work for that company anymore. I'm more than happy to help you, but also I know that I introduced you to your new rep. So I'm curious why, also you reached out to me. And by this time I already had the kid on the way. So, it was help and then question. And my thought was, he knows I'm not there anymore, but what is it about still wanting to work with me? And he said, well, Claire, we just know that wherever you're at, even if it's not the company where you used to work, that you would help us. And I think that was the first time I recognized that meanness that I had in my impact on other people. And it was the first time that I started to realize that I had value to offer aside from what my name tag read, and aside from what title I had in business, and aside from what company and what product I was carrying in my bag. And so I think, to your question, beginning to understand the value that we have is the very first step. And I don't think that we often have the opportunity to do that until maybe we take a retreat with the team, a year and a half into our employment, or maybe, just maybe, we have an amazing leadership coach brought into the organization to start digging up some of those internal things. But for me, it was quite a surprise. So I'm actually curious, when did you start recognizing that it was going to take the internal work and the internal discovery to start bringing out the external results?
In others or in myself?
In yourself.
Sure. Before I tell you that, I want to say what a great story that is, and how much I want the people that are listening to really key in to some of the important parts of that. And that is, we often think that we're the sum of our education or our work experience or everything that would typically be on a resume or in a LinkedIn profile, at least traditionally. And what we're discovering more and more is our reach is not defined necessarily by just our expertise and our qualifications, but that we're showing up as an individual that people want to understand the story of and want to know how they got there, just like you're asking me, and we're talking about this now. And I was just going to drop that there was a really interesting stat that came out that when they were talking about how LinkedIn controls its algorithm, it's not looking for subject like evidence that a person has a certain degree or education. They're looking for, are they talking in the context of their profession, when they're talking casually and they're talking about their family, and is this a real person? And so that realness, I think, is so important. And to answer your question, the most important, or the watershed moment for me, was about 2006, 2007. And I was working with a plumbing HVAC company. And I'd done a lot of good work with them. We redesigned their inventory systems. This is when I was more operationally focused. And I did a bunch of coaching for them. But there was a lot of hard operational work that went into turning this multi-generational company into a company that was full of trust and excitement, and teaching a lot of old dogs new tricks. I remember we had a senior stock guy that was well into his 60s, and that everybody thought He sort of was his way or the highway. This guy took up what I was teaching around how are we going to lower the sunk cost of rolling stock in their trucks, and we lowered it from like 300,000 average per truck down to 14,000, which is a huge savings when you're not talking about having a bunch of parts just rolling around the city and getting obsolete. Anyway, long story short, I did all this hard work and then I left. And about a year and a half later, I got a call saying, we have a conflict. We have a real problem with an employee. Somebody was hurt. They got hurt on the job site. And we don't understand why. And we need they're not really willing to talk to us, but we need to get to the bottom of it. And we suggested that they talk to an HR person or somebody that we could bring in that was independent. And yours was the name that came up. And we want you to come in. And I said, well, I'm not in the HR field. This is not the type of work that I do. I mean, I've done it. I've done readiness for work. But as a manager, and they said, no, we'd really like you to come up. So I checked with my lawyer, everything, made sure I was clear. And I got in the car and I rolled, it's about, 2 hours out of town. And I get to this company and I sit down with this gentleman, and it was a hard story. There was an issue with pain, and there was an issue with medication management, and he was not fit for work, period. And I had to tell the people that trusted me to bring them that was my conclusion. That wasn't what they wanted to hear. It's what they needed to hear. And so why I thought that was important is because although I was safe to weigh an opinion in, and I was ultimately, reasonably qualified for what they were asking me to do, the biggest thing was they trusted who I was and that I could hold the trust of these people on both sides of both the management and the workforce fence. And everybody was happy everybody was satisfied and felt complete. And to me, that was a huge moment that said, this had nothing to do with what I know, other than some experience doing it and some common sense and, basic management principles and things like this. But I wasn't an expert in that field. It was who I was and who I had meant to these people and the trust that I had garnered earlier. Thanks for asking. I didn't really expect my story to be in the middle of this, but that really would probably be the moment. And then it became clearer and clearer when I went in and I designed good processes. I was running enterprise risk portfolios and things like this, but it always boiled down to leadership, and leadership always boiled down to character. And when I teach brand, both for teams and individuals, I like to say, don't confuse brand with marketing. We can talk about it that way, but it's not just the font and the color. You can say anything on a piece of paper, but what do people experience? And so if you're going to put something down on a piece of paper, it better be the same thing they experience, because that's truly your brand. The moment they experience you, any words you put down on paper are secondary. But from a resume perspective, to say it that way, they better be consistent, right?
Yes, absolutely. And, from one of the many things I've learned from you is the flow state that you often talk about. And so I feel that if someone is to trust you to that point, right? So when they experience you after reading your resume, they know they're not getting catfished, because Tim is exactly what we expect, right?
Well,
And so
sometimes
you're exactly who I expected when I got to know you on LinkedIn. I wasn't shocked necessarily. I was delighted, but I wasn't shocked that you were who I had experienced through your marketing, and that aligned with who you are really and who your real brand really represents, right? I wasn't shocked that you were who I thought you were. But I think that it takes a level of that trust that you build to give people the confidence to say, look, we need this thing done. We know that it's not necessarily your specialty, but we believe and we trust you. and we know you. And so we are comfortable with saying, Tim, please help us get in the flow. And then you learn from there, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's important. And I'm going to throw it back at you. Sorry, but I got to do this
Uh-oh.
because it's funny when I talk to the people that help me with production and social media and those kind of things. And we're talking just last week, we were talking about a carousel post, something simple on LinkedIn when we talk about, part of the things that have to carry us. And yes, it was my brand, but she said, what do you like? And I said, go to Claire Davis's page and take a look. I'm serious. And not a word of a lie. And and again, not to pump your tires too much, but I mean, for people, again, go to Claire's page and see, because the thing is it's professional and slick, but it's also you, like through and through. And yeah, go for the carousel posts, stay for the Claire. That's what I would say to everybody out there.
That's going to be my new tagline.
There you go.
Thank you. You're hired.
Better than a breath of fresh Claire, we could say. No, I'm just sorry.
The best.
That was bad.
The best.
No, but I mean, seriously, like you want to. Okay, I work with, as you know, and you've helped me suss this out. I work with a lot of linear thinkers and a lot of engineers. And I remember, oh man, it must have been 11, 12 years ago now. I was working with a group in a mega project. And somebody came up to me afterwards and said, man, that was awesome, because I had done this collaboration session between competitors. And they said, but man, you sure sneak up on people. And I said, what? And he's like, we had no idea who you were or what you were about to do to us.
Oh,
and just as a piece of and I'm quite comfortable in the nebulous, right? But as a comment, they said, just so you know, engineers, geologists, scientists, whatnot, we're pretty linear for the most part. And we really like it when you tell us what you're about to do, and maybe even risk spoiling the surprise a little bit, but don't try to hold back the punchline. And man, so now, I mean, I think I'm kind of message forward with everything, because it's like they're going to figure it out anyway, and I'd rather not surprise them. So
oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, I don't know if you know this, but I have a degree in advertising from Ohio University. Go Bobcats, if there's any Bobcats out there.
There you go.
And when we were coming through and earning that degree, a lot of what we learned was that being clever was part of the job. And now there's something to be said about people who can bring levity to a message and really, kind of zag when people zig and so on and so forth. But sometimes if we're a little bit too clever, or if we sacrifice clarity for cleverness, it can get lost. It can get lost, just as ambiguity can. And something I see commonly with resumes. So not to completely,
no, go back to it, because I think it's
reboot.
huge. I think it's a great place to focus.
What I find is people are usually very nervous to speak about the specifics that they know that they are good at, because they feel that the industry expects them to use certain words and to use certain ways of putting things so that they will look prestigious on paper. But what happens is everybody ends up saying the same thing. And while I'd love to say there were like magic power words, right? Let's list some right now. Experienced, team player, just market disruptor. Okay. Those have all already been overused. And instead, a large part of what we do at Traction Resume is that we help people to recalibrate and understand, what are those specific things that you're known for doing? So, what do people commonly comment or compliment you on, Tim? Because probably that's something that people know you for, and you might not even have an opportunity to recognize that until you work with a resume writer, a coach, a storytelling strategist, somebody who makes you stop and say, oh, there is a through line. And I'll be darned, that does sound a bit like a system I might have been using all along, and I didn't even recognize it, but that's who you are. You
nailed it, honestly. Which is why, I really appreciate you as a peer mentor. Like, I do. I remember that I it was right. Like I'm just coming up on the anniversary of this double knee surgery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I told you the story where there was a really essential piece of work that I had to do, and I ended up doing it the day after I got home from the hospital. In
Mm-hmm.
my bed, marathon, 2 9-hour day virtual sessions. The
Yeah.
second one, after sitting too long the first day, was 100% from my back with my laptop propped up, so that they're looking down on me as I'm resting my head. Oh,
Uh-huh.
and my knees are up in the air with ice packs on them. But
Mm.
I got such a nice compliment from one of the people coming out of that session. And he said, you've got this way of making sure that everybody's voice is heard and everybody feels listened to in the room. And you always find a way to make space for everybody to get their thoughts out. And
Mm.
I never thought about that at all as
I
being
believe you.
something that I was able to do, but it's 100% core to my process. And it's also core to me individually because, from an empathetic perspective, I hate to feel like just because you're introverted or you're taking time to process what you're listening to, you're not getting your point across.
Mm-hmm.
Because meetings aren't always built for everybody in the room. So,
Right.
from that perspective, and as you say that, I'm like, you know what? I haven't even put that on my resume yet or my
Mm-hmm.
profile. I've never really. I think I put the link on my LinkedIn or the quote on my LinkedIn or something at one point. But
You know what
as
I
you say
find?
that, I've never actually connected those dots till right now that was
Oh,
meaningful for that reason. So thanks for
well,
that.
of course. And what I find most often, especially with people who have been in business for a while, and even not in business, it doesn't matter if you're in business necessarily to recognize this, but what I find is what is most familiar and
Mm.
natural for us. What is just something we do so naturally, we would never even recognize it as quote unquote special,
Mhm.
is exactly what is so remarkable to other people about us. It's like our mundane is remarkable to others.
Mm.
And I remember I was talking with my husband a long time ago about not that long ago, a couple years ago, about cooking.
Yeah.
And I learned everything that I know about cooking from his mother, as far as it comes from a recipe. And she was this incredible chef, baker. She could make absolutely anything. People would come from literally for miles to
Mhm.
join us for dinner at her house. And so she taught me everything that I knew about cooking from a recipe. So one day we're in the kitchen and, we're talking about what we're going to make. And we didn't happen to have the things for the recipe, my husband and I
Yep.
and his mother. And so I look in the fridge and I kind of just look at the chaos that's going on in there. We've
Mhm.
got like 3 jars of pickles, we've got like a couple of things of tuna and like a couple of and I go, "Well, we can make a pretty decent casserole." And both of them were like, "I'm sorry, what?"
What?
Like a casserole. And I was like, "Well, like if you connect these dots and so on, and this might work, and that's kind of a vinegary thing, and you know, and it'll make sense. All the chaos will make sense." And both of them stopped in their tracks, like, okay, well, let's try it.
Yeah.
But I didn't think I was so used to, I think, cobbling together because
No.
we didn't do a lot of recipes growing up, that for me, I am very much like an order out of chaos type. But I
100%. Oh,
never looked at myself that way until little things like that would come up, or someone will get on a phone with me before we write their resume and we'll talk for 2 hours and they will throw every detail from when they were 25 and on at me. And we will talk through everything.
and
And
you
at
take
the
the
end,
chaos and you make it
you bet.
clear. Yeah.
And they often even apologize. "Hey, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I was rambling." And I'm like, no, 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 that's the good stuff. The stuff you don't think is like mind blowing is what people often miss about themselves. That's so incredible. But it's hard when you're so used to doing things one way, you don't recognize it as significant.
So Claire Davis takes a messy career pantry and
Yeah,
turns it into an amazing resume casserole.
exactly. That gets you a job.
That gets you a job. But yeah, a
Right.
3-star Michelin casserole. Yeah,
Exactly. Thank
with
you.
nothing but Ritz crackers and well, no, it's got to have more than Ritz crackers and
Mm-hmm.
a can of tuna. But no, that's great, and it's funny because I can. So I don't know if you knew this, but I mean, I was a professional chef for a number of years.
Oh gosh, so this is
Yeah.
like you're
No,
shaking
this
your
is
head.
no, I love it. No, I love, we used to call it in the kitchen, the Jesus Christ factor.
You
Not to be sacrilegious, but to say that this is a person that can
need a
turn
miracle.
water into wine,
Oh,
right?
love it.
And you often face those things where something doesn't turn out and you have to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going through my classical chef training, and there were 3 masters. There was Escoffier, which the with the American which the American school teaches, and there
Okay.
was Herring, which was a slightly different approach, which is it was a German original master, and that's the school that I trained under in Alberta here, because we had a lot of Swiss, German, and Austrian chefs that we were working
Mm-hmm.
with. And among the masters, there was this. There's a book by Saulnier called The Repertoire. And the difference between those 3 books is that Saulnier just told you what the ingredients were. No levels, no
Oh.
preparations. The book was tiny. And it expected, because you were creative and flexible and knew the basics about how all the ingredients work together, that you'd be able to figure it out. And it was an
Oh.
amazing book. So the rest of the books are quite thick, and Saulnier was just this tiny little thing, and it would just say, okay, we're going to make this classical dish. Here's the 6 ingredients. And that was it.
Period.
Period.
Wow.
Good luck. You know what I mean? But the thing is that when you think about it, you never know exactly the nuances of what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, balance and composure, and you're back to flow, right? When you were talking about that, there's the creative anxiety that has to be there, the excitement and the ability to take something, and then the ability to turn that into something digestible, and the control that's needed. What do I do with it? How do I form it up? How do I make it useful? And
Mm-hmm.
so a balance between those 2 things, right? The chaos and the order, very, like, really, really important. And in a way, so much more dynamic, and it has so much more potential than starting, paint by number, which is like
Mm-hmm.
rounding around to the original part. And maybe this is a great place for us to begin to wrap up and maybe consider where we go next conversation. Is
Yes.
that the resumes, as you said originally, they can't be formulaic, and they
Right.
can't be so traditional, because we've gone the route of painting by number, and it puts you into the hopper with a bunch of other people that look pretty similar to you.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
differentiation. So maybe part of brand is embracing the chaos and getting through the messy stuff. I love this thought of, like, brand casserole. Like, wow. So maybe I
And
think that's
maybe a little Jesus Christ moment on top.
you know what I mean?
Oh, you need a
Shebang.
little help.
You might need a little help, but I mean, and that's
Love
the
it.
thing. Why do we need help? Well, if we're in a project, we need a lot of different personalities or work styles to bring that project home. We need the deep thinkers and the inventors, and we need the people who can tell what's a good idea and what's a bad idea. And we need those people that are going to connect the dots, and we need those people that are going to bring the essentials to making it happen. And then we need those people that are actually going to bring it home and produce that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anything we do that's of consequence and worth has all of that. It's rare that a single person, let alone the person from the inside, the applicant, can do that fairly for themselves. And it takes an outside view to
Mm-hmm.
become fluent. So anyway, I'm excited by this. The casserole. So we could maybe next time, and maybe in not too long, we should really try to find time. Let's go for it.
Sure.
Let's talk about some of that internal journey and some of that chaos and dealing with it. And then also maybe some of the fear that stops people in their tracks for saying, you know what? You got pickles. Yeah, you got some tomato paste. This
There's
can
a
work.
caper.
A caper. we're either going to have a casserole or we're going to have some warm antipasto. So let's make this happen.
Yeah.
All right.
Also, now I'm hungry.
Are you? Final thoughts there, Claire, and maybe as we wrap up, let people know where you are, what you're doing, how can they get in touch, how can they learn more?
So thank you so much for having me today. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be in leagues with you, and you're so incredibly generous with the advice and the peer mentorship that you share. So thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be on your show. I would
ditto.
Now it's a lot of fun. We just keep impromptu recording shows together. It's how it should always be.
Yeah.
But I would say, if anybody is out there and they are struggling moving forward in their career, or you've been laid off, or you want to get a promotion and you are stuck and you keep getting passed over, or hey, maybe you've had a beautiful career and you want to get into the C-suite, but you're just not sure how to package yourself to do those things, give us a call, because Traction Resume, that's our bread and butter. What we do is we really listen to your story. And believe me, we've heard some really complex, challenging ones, and we help you to sort it out so that not only do you show up brilliantly as you are on paper, but also so that you learn how to talk about yourself too. Because a lot of times just going through the process can remind you what that system for success really looks like for you, and why that makes you absolutely powerful, and what that system is that you're ready to bring in terms of value to somebody else. So if you want to find me, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I pretty much live there. Or you can always find out more at tractionresume.com. That's TRACTIONRESUME.com.
And we'll have all of those links in the show notes.
Awesome.
So we'll make sure. And, one more time, I know that you've really helped me clarify who I am and what my offering is. And so, honestly, I can speak from experience that people will know it. Just go and see, folks. You'll get it pretty quick.
Come send me a message. I'll send you a voice note.
There you go.
I love it. Yeah.
Sounds great. All right, Claire, thank you so much. And I can't wait till we do this again. Okay.
Me too. Thanks,
All
Tim.
Right. Best of luck. Bye.
You are such a pro. This is great.
Oh, come on.
So much fun.